The first thing that is required if you want to start a homeschool cooperative is you got to have a heart for people. This is a ministry, and sometimes it's ugly, Zan. It's
yes,
people,
that's right. That's right.
We're working with people. But I think once you have a vision for it and you know that this is what the Lord asks you to do, we always start with just prayer. I think we sometimes forget that the same God who spoke the world into being and raised Lazarus from the dead is alive today, and he is still doing miracles. And we got to care enough about what's happening. But I also think we have to be willing. When you look at starting a homeschool resource center, you got to understand, or even a homeschool cooperative or a homeschool ministry, enemy's going to come against you.
That's right.
And you have to be ready for that. And you have to be willing to count the cost. Find other people around you who are willing to count the cost. I think our kids are worth it.
Hi, welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com.
Hi, I'm Zan Tyler, and welcome to my podcast, Zan Tyler, Thriving in Your Homeschool. We are so excited to have Heidi St. with us today. Heidi is one of my dear friends from way back. I'm sure she needs no introduction for most of you. If you want to, you can find Heidi at HeidiSt.John.com or type in her name, and 3 billion results will come up on Google. So Heidi is an amazing author, podcaster, speaker, and she and Jay are also the mother of 7 wonderful children and many grandchildren. So it's just a real pleasure today and a real treat to have Heidi with us. Heidi, thank you for being here.
Thank you for doing this. This is fun.
Oh my goodness. So for those of you who don't know, Joe and I traveled to Washington to be with Heidi and Jay to podcast and also see this amazing resource center.
Yep.
So it's like a co-op on steroids. And so I want to tell you just a little bit about my foray into co-ops back in the day and why I'm so committed to their health and well-being for the homeschooling community at large. So this is about 1997. We had been homeschooling since 1984. There's no internet. There's really not that connection in homeschooling, but we had amazing support groups. We had amazing phone trees and ways to communicate. You know, you just do what you got to do.
I miss the phone trees.
Yeah.
Life was simpler.
Yes. Yeah. And then we had fax trees.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So when the faxes came
I don't
out
miss that.
in 1994, I do not miss my fax machine.
No.
And so, but we didn't have all these ways for people to get together. Now, support groups would have, Monday meetings or something for the moms, but co-ops, they just weren't really a thing. I think they were beginning to spring up in the 90s, but they weren't prolific and they weren't common. And so I can remember in 1995 or 96 getting a call from some women, and these women were amazing moms, and they said, Zan, we need to start a co-op. And so I say, okay, tell me what a co-op is, And this was associated with Masters Academy. And so it was fine arts, and it focused on some things you couldn't do at home, like instruction in art and design and music and those things that aren't always readily available within your own 4 walls. And I said, that sounds amazing. Let me know when you get it started. We'll publicize it through our newsletter, of course, written newsletter at SCAES, our homeschooling organization, and I'll help. And they said, oh no, we don't want you to help. We want you to start it.
Of course.
And I said, no, I don't think so. Thank you. I've started a few things in the last few years. And I'm a little tired.
I wouldn't mind taking a break.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So y'all start it and let me know. And so then really they just basically start showing up on my front porch, and we had a great meeting and we started the co-op. And I'll never forget the first co-op meeting in this church. Joe took off work and he was with me that day. And it was like we watched, the people came through the portico and it was like 1,000 minivans. And they didn't even stop. They just kind of came to this rolling slowdown and pushed all the kids out. And they were like, hallelujah, I've got 3 hours to myself today. I mean, having 3 hours to yourself as a homeschool mom was unheard of. And so we're still on the board. It's become Excelsior now. Our grandkids were involved for many years at the co-op, and we're still on the board. And I just think it was so great for Lizzie to have that opportunity. She was involved in community theater, but they did some great productions in our co-op. I began to see the real value of community. And so, Heidi, that's why I'm here, because what you and Jay have done with the resource center here, Firmly Planted Resource Center, is really amazing. So if you don't mind, just take us through the history of your first foray into co-ops and how it ended up here.
Well, as you well know, I sort of fell into homeschooling. I really went into it kicking and screaming. I did not want to be a homeschool mom. I could not understand why any woman in her right mind want to be locked up for 12 years in a row with her kids when a yellow bus come take them away for free. But I knew when the Lord was asking us to homeschool our kids. And it's a whole big, long story how the Lord brought us into it. But one of the very first things that happened within a year or so of us homeschooling is I was really lonely. We moved from Oregon, where my husband was working, to northern Washington State, about 5.5 hours north, so that he could become a pastor, a worship pastor up there. And there weren't very many people that I knew that were homeschooling. And the ones that I did know that were homeschooling, I mean, honestly, Zan, I had to give my eye teeth. There was one mom, her name was Teresa, that homeschooled, and she'd been doing it for a long time before me. And her kids were probably junior high, high school. And I said, can I just come over and just watch you? Can I just sit there and just see what you do? Because I felt like, I'm doing okay, but not great. And she said yes, but sort of reluctantly.
Yeah,
I think she said yes because I was a pastor's wife, not because she really wanted to do it. And at that point, the loneliness I felt just really intensified.
I want to stop you there because this loneliness is real.
Yeah.
And when we started homeschooling, it wasn't much different. I mean, if you don't know people who were homeschooling, it doesn't matter if it's 1984 or in the 90s or if it's today. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, because of our struggles, and we talked about that, we were threatened with jail. We had people in our neighborhood who quit letting their children play with our kids, and people at church that wouldn't talk to us, and relatives, relatives. And it is lonely. I can remember I was reading through the book of Revelation, and at the beginning it talks about how John is in exile on the island of Patmos.
Yep.
And he from that experience of exile, he gives the church maybe his greatest work ever, the book of Revelation, of the revelation of Jesus. But I just remember thinking, I remember praying and crying over that passage. I said, Lord, I know John was an extrovert. He loved his people and he's in exile. And I said, remember me? I love my people too. And nobody will speak to me. Everybody hates me. And, it was maybe the loneliest I have ever been in my life. Yeah. So when you say you were lonely, I know there's still moms out there, with everything that's available today in homeschooling that are lonely. And this is no joke. We don't, I had no choice. But now there are choices today. You don't need to be lonely in your homeschooling. Okay, so I totally interrupted you, but that
was good though, because I think moms need to hear that if you feel lonely, A, it's pretty normal, and a lot of us have been there. And B, get help. You don't need to stay in that.
That's right.
Place.
That's right.
And I think for me, we had 3 children at the time, and I was lonely as a pastor's wife. And I was lonely as a mother because I had taken my kids out of the school. And before that, I'd been really involved in the school. I was a graduate of a Christian school. And the very first thing we did when we had, when our daughter became school age was we put her in the Christian school. Well, then we realized, okay, well, this is expensive. You can't be a pastor and put your kids in a Christian school, which is sad and ridiculous, but that's a whole other podcast. So I went down, I found a homeschool supply store. So we moved up to Northern Washington. I'm relatively new in homeschooling, probably about 1.5 years, 2 years into it. And I hear about a homeschool supply store. I go down there. The women were, they weren't unkind to me, but they also weren't welcoming. And I left that store with a couple of, spelling workbooks and some things. And I sat in my car. I don't know, this is a core memory for me because I could cry thinking about it. I came out of the store. And I don't consider myself to be I'm not an introvert for sure, but I like my quiet also. But I'm telling you what, I walk out of that store, it's dark, it's raining, and I sat in the car and I just cried and cried and cried. And I thought, I can't do this by myself. I don't want to do this by myself. Here's my husband. I'm so jealous. He goes to work every day and he's talking to, adults. He's real people. He's talking to people, and I'm breaking up fights. And now I've taken on this responsibility of homeschooling. So now the kids are with me all day long. And I was really tired. I was tired. I was sad. I was lonely. And I went to the pastor's wife there. And this is a whole other podcast too, which maybe this would be a good thing to talk about sometime too. But I went to the pastor's wife there and I told her, I'm struggling. I feel like I'm at the jumping off place for depression. First thing she said was, well, put your kids in school like a normal person. And then she said, also, I don't want you talking about that with the women of the church. You're here to be an encouragement to them. You're not here for them to minister to you. And at that point I knew if I can't find my people, I'm not going to be okay. And I'd heard about this idea of a homeschool cooperative, and kind of like you, I was like, what? Kind of a new idea.
Right.
And so I went to a little town about 1.5 hours south of where we were, and I watched what they did, and I thought, well, shoot, I could do that. I could start that. I wonder if anybody else would be interested. So I came home, told all the kids, I have this idea. We could start a homeschool cooperative because dad's a pastor. They're not going to say no to a pastor's wife.
Right. So
my kids and I made these flyers, and it just said, we want to start a homeschool co-op. We're going to have an information meeting. Very simple flyer. We printed about 25 or 30 of them, and my kids and I went to every grocery store, every coffee shop. We put them up in Starbucks all over the place, and it just had the date and the time and said, show up and we're going to give you our idea. Well, Zan, I thought maybe 10 people would show up. And darned if 75 people didn't show up for that meeting.
Goodness gracious.
My husband was just floored. We had people going out and trying to get, chairs from the back of the storage room so that people would have a place to sit. And I knew in that moment I was on to something. And I knew that I wasn't the only homeschool mom that needed other moms.
That's right. And it was lonely. It was hurting.
It was, yes. And then I also realized within pretty short order, these moms have talents. Like you got America's Got Talent. I'm telling homeschool moms got talent.
That's right.
They can do all kinds of things. So we started making a list of all the talents and gifts that they brought. And I realized, man, we could make a schedule. So we started this thing we called Friday School. And we met every Friday. We did 10 Fridays on and 4 Fridays off. And they taught everything from, tap dancing to Constitution to calligraphy. I mean, you name it. Whatever they were interested in teaching, they taught it. And I taught classes too. And we developed this beautiful community of homeschool moms and kids. And before long, there were 400 kids in this program. I mean, it was enormous, and people were coming from all over the place. Shortly after that, the program's doing really, really well. My husband takes another job in Southwest Washington, where we live now. And so we moved, 4.5 hours south, started all over again. The same thing happened to me again. I was just lonely. But this time I knew I had a solution.
You knew what to do. That's right.
So I did the same thing again. I put posters up all over the place. And my kids, I think, acutely feeling it this time because they left a thriving community of homeschooled kids. Right. And we came down to this new church, a huge church, and they offered us free tuition at their private school. And Zan, I thought this was the holy grail. I thought I won the lottery for educating my kids. And the day that Jay and I were supposed to put our kids in that private school, I knew, I could just feel it in my spirit. The Lord was like, no, you're going to keep him home. And I knew right then I'm a homeschooler for life. Like I'm in this thing.
That was your Patrick Henry moment.
It really was. I knew here I'm being offered free tuition, but I knew now the blessing because my kids had already been in school before. Savannah had already been in school. And then I'd had, 4 or 5 years of homeschooling. Now I had the opportunity to put him in a private school for free. And I realized I don't want to do that. And so we started another homeschool cooperative.
Okay. So one thing I want to just kind of reiterate what you said. It just wasn't for you anymore at this point. It's for the kids. Right. So, we talked about being lonely homeschool moms, but our kids also can be lonely.
We're created for relationship.
That's right.
And we need it. And homeschooling I do not think, unless you live on an island somewhere and you're by yourself, we were created for relationship. And I think that applies to homeschooling. It should never be done as this, we're going to quarantine ourselves from the rest of the world. Right. Our kids need to be around other kids. They need, I'm sorry, but the hurt that comes from relationships where, you're on the receiving end of gossip or whatever it is. That's actually an important part of growing up. And there's nothing perfect about homeschoolers or homeschool cooperatives. But I'll tell you what, it's a safe environment, generally speaking, that you can learn how to develop friendships and moms can make other friends. I don't think it can be understated. And I know I'm right because of the success of the cooperatives that we started. And so I think I met you somewhere in that era of our lives, in the mid 2000s, where we were planting homeschool cooperatives because the one that we started in Vancouver quickly grew. Then we planted another one about 45 minutes north of us, and that one exploded. Then we planted another one about 15 minutes east.
This is while you lived in one location, you were starting these other locations for these
because
co-ops.
we just didn't have enough room. I mean, we
That's amazing.
Had hundreds and hundreds of kids that were coming to this room. And we start with chapel every Friday. So the kids were hearing about the gospel. They were taking really wonderful classes. Some of them were going on to take leadership positions in some of these places.
Was this still your Friday?
This is still Friday school, one day a week.
I love that title, Friday school.
And it was great. And I still have done like that model with our kids in homeschooling. We don't typically homeschool our kids on Fridays. We can get everything we need to get done Monday through Thursday. And then we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday to kind of do our thing that's not related to school necessarily. And Friday school was really part of that. But so eventually we formed a nonprofit organization, which is now Firmly Planted Family. And we planted well over 100 homeschool cooperatives. We planted them in Canada. We planted them all over the United States.
How did you do that from your home base?
Very, very carefully and with a lot of prayer. We put the non in nonprofit, we really, I was so passionate. Jay and I thought, okay, pastors will love this.
Right.
Because it's just like Awana, but for homeschoolers.
Right.
And we were wrong. The vast majority of the pastors that we went to didn't want to minister to homeschoolers. They felt like it would be a divisive issue in their churches. I don't have time today, but I could tell you stories that still make me cry. Pastors who just did not get it. And I think if the pastors would have listened, we would have planted 1,000 cooperatives.
Right.
But as it was, we ended up, in the hundreds.
Well, I know just from our experience with the co-op, with Excelsior in Columbia, we'd outgrow a church. It's hard to find churches that are...
Sorry, but they're the worst. these pastors who don't have a kingdom mindset as it relates to education, and they're more concerned with the tithing members of the church. I can't tell you how many pastors said, well, are these kids going to bring Kool-Aid in their thermoses? Are they going to injure the carpet? Yes, they are. And the very first co-op that we started in Southwest Washington, the pastor, I love this man, Tim Crownover, he didn't ask us a single thing about the building or anything. And it's actually written into the DNA of our ministry that we leave the buildings better than we find them.
Right.
These kids, they leave those buildings, they shine like the top of the Chrysler building. Everything gets back to where it was. The floors are vacuumed, the bathrooms are clean, the toilets are scrubbed, the windows are washed. We took care of those facilities. But Pastor Tim said to me, he said, I hope that when the Lord returns, when the rapture happens and that trumpet sounds, that this building falls down, because it was on the verge of falling down anyway, because we used it to the limits of what we could do. That's a pastor. That's a shepherd.
Yes.
And we found pastors like that around the United States. And I remember I was speaking in Tennessee at the time. Jay and I were living in Tennessee for my speaking season because by this time I've written several books. I'm out on the speaker circuit. I've known you for several years by this time.
And you need an airport that's more central.
That's right. And that was a problem. And so we were living in Chattanooga for several months of the year just so we could be closer to the places that I was speaking. And I remember looking at Jay over, spaghetti dinner, just sitting there in the kitchen saying to him, the co-ops aren't going to be enough. A 1 day a week co-op is not going to be enough because there's going to be a mass exit. There has to be. What parent in their right mind are going to leave their kids in the system of education when all of a sudden we're telling them your gender is fluid? That's insane. Well, fast forward, the Lord ends up giving us a building. And it's an amazing story, which again, I don't have time to tell you today.
And we're back in Washington now.
Yeah, now I'm back in Washington because we live in Washington. We were just traveling for my speaking season. And I'll tell you what, we started praying. We came back, all the way back. We were driving all the way from Tennessee back to Washington State. And while we're driving, I'm writing down visions and things that the Lord has given me about what this homeschool resource center might look like. We found a pair of abandoned buildings in Battleground. I think I told you about it at the time. And then we did a fundraiser and we organized all this in just a matter of weeks. So people came from all over the homeschool community. And I thought we're going to raise $100,000. We're going to buy these buildings. We raised about $4,000 that day. It was blistering hot. Nothing worked that we wanted to work. We had prayed over these buildings. We'd fasted over it. I thought for sure God was going to do it. And about 3 days after this, what I felt like was just a failure, I looked at my husband after that was over and I was like, well, that didn't work, And about 3 days later, a gentleman called and he said, I was at your fundraiser and my wife and I would like to buy those buildings.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What? And he told me again, I could not, I dropped the phone. I'm like, just a minute. I dropped the phone. I go running downstairs. I tell Jay, you have to come upstairs. You have to listen to this. I put him on speaker. We're both just in tears. We can't believe it. And then we begin the process of securing the buildings. We have to get permits for parking. The city that we were trying to build it in, Battleground, Washington, was just oppressive for a new business. They wanted us to put in a $250,000 parking lot that would mimic a rainforest for environmental reasons and all kinds. And they priced us out of the market and the deal fell through. And, we thought, okay, and this went on for months.
And Heidi, I just want to tell people here, this is where perseverance comes in. Scripture puts such a premium on perseverance. If you want to do an interesting word study in Scripture, look at the word perseverance, but then look and see how many times it's tied to faith. And that's what I saw with y'all when you were going through all of that.
And
because
I cried.
You kept getting no. Most people would have given up, but you didn't.
We were crying out to the Lord, Father, look what is happening. These are your children. And we have an idea that we actually think will be a solution to the wickedness that is coming out of our public schools. These are your children. And we just cried out to the Lord. And we were looking at, we were looking at dump places now. Now we're looking like, abandoned Kmart buildings. And one guy said, well, I could give you an attic space in this abandoned Kmart building. But as we were walking out, he goes, you're going to want to reinforce the flooring in the attic space because it would sure be a bad headline if one of your kids fell through the ceiling. And I was like, this is not going to work.
Thank you very much.
This is not going to work. And it was that night, and I remember it because it was January, just these core memories. This sticks with me just like the day that I was in Mount Vernon and I was sitting in front of that little homeschool supply store just crying my eyes out. We left that building that night. We're walking out, it's pouring down rain. It's a cold January night. And this gentleman that was with us said, let's pray. He said, I'm going to pray for God's favor to pour out on you, that God would open the floodgates of blessing over the vision he's given you, just like you see the rain coming down around you. And we were under this little tiny, like the size of a door, this little tiny overhang. And all three of us huddled together out of the rain underneath this little overhang. And we began to pray. And we were driving home that night and I got a phone call from this guy. And he says, it occurs to me as I was driving home, I have a building that's going to come up for rent in October, and go look at it. And he gave us the address, and we thought, well, what do we have to lose? I think it's funny that someone would own enough buildings that they would forget that they had one.
Yeah, right.
So that's this amazing human being. And anyway, so we drove over there and we pull up in front of this, what I thought was just a beautiful building. It was, you've been there.
Yes,
it was gated. And me of little faith, I looked at Jay because we've been looking at, I'm not kidding you, Zan, we were looking at dumpy places. And I looked at Jay and I was like, I think we're in the wrong place. Call him back and see if we can get the address and we'll go find it because this is not it. So Jay calls him and he says, no, I gave you the right address. And I said, I don't think so. He's on speaker. He says, well, does it have, it should be gated. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He goes, well, there should be, 3 loading docks. Do you see them? Yes. He said, there's a giant flagpole right in the front yard and it should be lit. Do you see it? And I'm like, yes. And he goes, all right. He said, I look over at my husband and right as I'm looking over at my husband, our friend says, listen, pray about it. And if you guys would like that building, I'll lease it to you for $1 a year.
Whoa.
And I look at my husband who's just sobbing. He can't even talk. And I said, we don't need to pray about it. We've been praying about it.
That's right.
We'll take it. And he goes, don't you want to go inside? No, I don't want to go inside. I just came from the broken down roof of a Kmart building. I will take this every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And later on, at the very first part of October, we took possession of that building.
What year is this?
This would have been 2017.
Okay.
We take a possession of the building. We work for 30 days straight. We're working 15 hours a day trying to get this building ready to hold classes. Because in my mind, I'm like, if you build it, they'll come. Like Jay and I are just so sure. And that was really the beginning of what you see here today at the Homeschool Resource Center. COVID came, and in 2020, they threatened to shut our building down. We were turned into the Department of Labor and Industries. We determined, because we had more, as you can imagine,
right,
more students came during COVID. I mean, we already had a thriving program, but we tripled in size in COVID. And the Lord blessed it. And then 2.5 years ago, we knew we needed a bigger building. We were told about this one. I drove by it and it was the same thing that happened last time. We're like, oh no, but the Lord can do it. Because one thing we learned, I mean, you said perseverance, and you're right. My definition of perseverance is patience in action. It's while we're waiting for the Lord to do the thing that we know He's put on our heart. We don't sit still. We don't feel sorry for ourselves. We keep moving.
Right.
And we kept moving. So we came to this building and we were bringing groups of people here and we're marching around this building 7 times. I mean, we're anointing the doorposts with oil. You can always tell the Baptists from the Pentecostals, because the Pentecostals come, they're bringing their flags and their tambourine, and they're walking on one side, and the Baptists are like, you go, you do that, you do you, boo. We'll be over here quietly praying to the Lord. You had people speaking in tongues. It was great, and the Lord honored that prayer, and it's such an amazing story because we closed on those series of ups and downs, and I think that's when the Lord is really at work, because it's very rarely. The skyrocket to whatever.
That's right.
It's this, right?
Is.
It's just the ups and the downs and the moments that you feel like you're going to fail. We came to closing, and we had received a wonderful grant that was very, very helpful, but we still owed, I think it was going to be like $200 or maybe $300 more $1,000. And we were coming to close on this thing. And so we were starting to look at, well, how can we I was calling banks, people who I know owned banks, people who helped like Answers in Genesis and stuff like that. And we got a phone call. I want to say it was maybe 24, 48 hours before we were to close, from the same gentleman who said, my wife and I prayed about it, and you're not supposed to be in debt. We'll cover the rest of it. And we went to closing with $16.4 million in cash.
That is amazing.
It's just the Lord.
So Heidi, so that's pretty remarkable. Talk to people for just a minute who are just looking to start a co-op or just starting this journey.
Well, we literally wrote the book on this. So people can go to firmlyplantedfamily.org and they can click on the Homeschool Resource Center. They can find out how to start a homeschool cooperative. What you need to start a homeschool cooperative is you need a pastor with a heart to serve homeschool families. That's the number one requirement. If he looks at you sideways, if he thinks you're dumb, if he doesn't like homeschooling, he's not your person. Go somewhere else. I went to 13 pastors before I found one in Vancouver who would let us start a homeschool co-op. So it may take some time, but the Lord will be in it. He'll honor that perseverance. After that, you need a building, and we walk you all the way through how to set up a leadership team, how to get classes, how to do registration, all of it. And my husband has designed a database that we use for all of our registration. He's been working on that for goodness sake, 20 years. And so that registration system is pretty powerful in and of itself. If you're interested in starting a homeschool resource center like the one we have here, you need a building. And I know that the Lord has a building for you if you're interested, because he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Amen. And God can do it. And I believe, and I know, Zan, you share this belief with me, if there were resource centers like this one in every city in America, the country would change overnight.
Absolutely.
It would change overnight.
Absolutely.
Because education is the root of and we got all kinds of people. I mean, we got 1,000 people hacking at the branches of the problem in this country for every one person that's hacking at the root. And if we want to root out gender ideology out of the culture, if you want to root out communism, like this belief that socialism, communism are somehow good ideas,
right,
as if history isn't replete with examples of why that's not true. A homeschool resource center, what we do here is we take away every barrier that would stand in the way of a homeschool parent saying, I just can't do that.
And really, that is the barrier. That is the reason. There's so many verses in Scripture that talk about removing the barrier from my people, in Isaiah especially. And so when they're looking to start a homeschool resource center, give them a vision. Just take a few minutes just to say, what is the vision that will allow normal moms and dads to hop on board with this and hang in there till the end?
Well, I think you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. It's like homeschooling. You know, if you don't have a vision, you won't finish. I think the first thing that is required if you want to start a homeschool cooperative, you got to have a heart for people. This is a ministry, and sometimes it's ugly, Zan. It's people,
that's right. That's right.
We're working with people, but I think once you have a vision for it, and you know that this is what the Lord asks you to do, we always start with just prayer. I think we sometimes forget that the same God who spoke the world into being and raised Lazarus from the dead is alive today, and he is still doing miracles. And we got to care enough about what's happening. I mean, I ran for Congress in 2022. I'm not afraid of a challenge. But I also think we have to be willing, when you look at starting a homeschool resource center, you got to understand, or even a homeschool cooperative or a homeschool ministry, enemy's going to come against you.
That's right.
And you have to be ready for that. And you have to be willing to count the cost. Find other people around you who are willing to count the cost. I think our kids are worth it.
Absolutely.
I think they are. And so we've been committed here for a long, long time to teaching people how to do that. We've been doing it for 20 years. First Class Homeschool Ministries, which is how we started, has become Firmly Planted Family. This is the Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center. It's based out of Psalm 1:3, that the Bible teaches that the person who trusts in the Lord is like a tree that's firmly planted by streams of water, who yields his fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers. That is the promise of the Lord of Heaven's armies toward his people who call on his name and want to follow him. That's what the homeschool movement has done, I think, as a general rule. That's what God has blessed in the past, and I think it's what he wants to bless in the future. It takes men and women of fortitude and courage. I mean, you're a perfect example of that. It took perseverance for you to pave the way for homeschool freedom in South Carolina, and it takes perseverance to start a homeschool resource center or to start a homeschool cooperative.
To start any new initiative. That's right.
New endeavor. It takes that. So you got to know, yes, the Lord's called me to do it. And then you got to be, I told you the next book I write, I think I'm going to call it, well, that didn't work. For all the things that we've tried that didn't work. And I think you have to be willing to innovate. And I think that's true in every business. For entrepreneurs, you're going to start something and you're going to, it needs to be tweaked a little bit. You got to be willing to tweak it. You got to be willing to change on the fly. You got to be willing to follow the Holy Spirit and to move when he says move. And then you leave the results up to the Lord. And God's doing amazing things. And I don't think he's going to stop here.
Oh, my goodness. I was not prepared, Heidi. I saw this building. I saw this building when you had just bought it, but just not moved in.
Yeah.
And I know what's going on because I keep up with you online and we talk.
Yeah.
Oh, my word. I was just floored when we walked in today. Today is like preschool seedlings day.
Yeah, seedlings are here.
And so the building is full of preschoolers who are doing dance and art and karate and learning the Word of God. Yeah. It is amazing. And then we saw the gym. We saw the new Mustang for the automotive unit. You've got hundreds and hundreds of classes going on, a place for parents to sit and drink coffee while their kids are in the resource center. So really the sky is the limit. And also, just the benefit for the community. I'm thinking about how homeschoolers reach out. Jay was telling us you have chess.
Yes, the chess club here.
Yes, and competitions that involve the community. And that's
we just hosted, last weekend we hosted the championships for NCFCA here, and they took the whole building for the whole day, actually for 2 or 3 days.
And that's the Homeschool Speech and Debate League, for those of you who don't know that. And that's, we did a whole podcast on that. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. So neat to see the building being used. For the glory of God.
And you have drama productions. And you have basketball games in the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really, it is an amazing thing to behold.
Well, I think, I don't know if it's just I'm getting older or if I'm just, I think I just live in this constant state of thankfulness. Jay and I drive it to this building almost every day. And every time I come around the corner, I'm like, I still can't believe it. I'm pinching myself. I can't believe that the Lord's letting us do it. And there's still things that are difficult. I think that's life. But boy, this just sense of profound thankfulness that God did it.
That's right.
And I hope, Zan, I never get over it.
Right.
I hope I never get over just the thankfulness to the Lord for what He's done. I asked Ken Ham last time I was at the Ark with him. We were up at the top of literally on the top of the Ark. And I said, and Mally, his wife, was with us. And I said, can you just believe what the Lord is allowing, what God is letting you do? And I'll never forget, Ken's wife, who I love dearly, she said, oh no. She said, we come here, we just can't believe it. We can't believe it. We can't believe that people are like, that's Ken Ham, like his pictures everywhere, because they remember where they started.
Right.
And they know it was just the Lord. And I think God honors that, Dan. I think He honors humility. The minute we start going, oh, look, I had this great idea. And I walked on the moon. I think I think the minute we stop giving glory and honor to the Lord is the minute that the blessing will be removed from this ministry. And we know it's only Him.
Mike Ferris, and I know you and Mike are close, and we've had this conversation so many times. The homeschooling community should not exist like it does today.
No.
The lawsuits, the legislative victories, none of the battle was the
spiritual warfare.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I believe it's the Lord going before us and paving the way and letting us participate just a little bit in the. We do
Thank you, Lord.
He does the heavy lifting,
He does.
and then we get to come along and just enjoy all the benefits of that. It's really pretty remarkable, and I really believe, like you believe, that homeschooling is kingdom building work.
Absolutely true.
And there's so much of it that's daily and mundane. We lose that vision as homeschooling mamas sometimes, but nurturing kids for the kingdom is, that's what that's what Jesus told Peter to do in his last conversation with him. Feed my sheep.
That's right.
And that's what He's telling us to do.
Yeah.
And these resource centers, what you and Jay are doing here, I just have to say, wow. It is amazing. And we know it's the Lord, but we thank you, Heidi, for all the contributions you and Jay have made in the homeschooling community. Your books, your podcast, your resource centers. You've called me to dig deep and think, Lord, I need more faith. And so you have been a real light to me in many dark places. And I'll always appreciate your friendship. Being here today, I just want to rise up and just say, thank you, Jesus. And
it's all you.
And thank you, Heidi and Jay, and just this remarkable center. Yeah. So let all of us not grow weary in well-doing. And you moms and dads who have homeschoolers in high school and will be through in a few years, don't quit.
Oh, my goodness.
Stay in the game, because now you have time to really help homeschoolers. I was thinking about this last night, 2 nights ago at a ball game. The man who's coaching our grandson's high school basketball team, and they are great. His kids are grown and gone now. He had 7 kids that they homeschooled, and he's sitting in that restaurant with us at 11 o'clock at night celebrating a victory.
Isn't that fun?
And, his kids are grown and gone. So, what a blessing Russell and Dara have been to us. Don't quit. Look for ways to give back, because you're going to have grandkids coming through, and we want this to be a generational movement.
Boy.
And if we can give pass our vision from generation to generation. I mean, the Lord works in generations, and he works in families, and he works in generations. And
well, I think we were talking about on the way in this morning to the studios that we often talk about generational curses. And one man's decision, as the leader of his home, to be unfaithful to his wife, to not shepherd his children in the way that God would have him do it. That can be the start of or a continuation of a generational curse. The opposite of that would be that man who chooses to be faithful to his wife, that wife who's faithful to her husband. Those little decisions that we make every day to teach our children and train them in righteousness is also generational. But that would be a generational blessing. And we see it, right? Because God does work. You're absolutely right. In generations. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I have watched him working in your life now for a really long time. It's such a joy to spend some time with you, and that you guys would take your time to come out here all the way from South Carolina. Thanks for doing that.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. And I think we just want to remind moms and dads as we close, eternity hangs in the balance. This is not about our life here and now, although that's a large part of it. This is about preparing our children to be in heaven with us, and our children and our children's children and their children and their children. So, Heidi, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all you and Jay have done. Tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I think, as you said at the onset of the show, is absolutely right. I'm lit up like a Christmas tree on social media and all over Google, so they can certainly find me at HeidiSt.com. And if they're interested in the Homeschool Resource Center, that would be firmlyplantedfamily.org, and you can click on the Homeschool Resource Center there. I've written, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 books now. And I have a podcast coming up on 25 million downloads. They can find that at the Heidi St. John podcast.
Okay. And as always, you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media as well. Thank you so much for being with us today. We know you have a lot of different places you can spend your time. And we just pray that God continues to bless you and your family. Until next time, bye.